starting in just a moment here.
Great.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, there we go. Hi, I was talking with the microphone off. Good evening, everybody. I believe all board members are present for this meeting. And so we'll go ahead. Let's do a roll call. So because I know that not everybody can see who's here on the panel. Director Morris,
Here.
Director Hoover,
Here.
Director Bolerjack,
Here.
Director Larson.
Here.
And then do we have any student reps here this evening? I don't see any at this time. Okay. And then board members are present, and we'll go ahead and start with welcome. So welcome community members. We'll begin with the land and labor acknowledgement. In the U.S., the city of Tukwila and by extension, Tukwila School District's existence and legacy would not be possible without the genocide, displacement, and erasure of Native people and the forced labor of enslaved Black people. We acknowledge, respect, and honor those whose lives allow us to work, live, and learn in the present. We would like to honor the indigenous voices, recognizing the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, and Coast Salish tribes whose land we occupy. We'd like to acknowledge their continual work to unsettle conversations, injustices, and miseducation. We hold sacred the people whose lives have made this work possible. Land and labor acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. The afterlives of colonialism and the legacies of racial slavery are current ongoing processes. Let us be mindful of our present participation in this ongoing historical process. We acknowledge all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples who contributed to the building of this country and continue to serve within our labor force. We acknowledge all unpaid caregiving labor. Finally, we acknowledge that our educational institutions rely on hourly, student, contingent, and unpaid labor that we recognize these contributions. Let us honor the legacy of countless youth, adults, and allies of Nobel Peace Prize recipient, Reverend King County namesake, Dr. Martin Luther King. Let us continue to actively engage in essential, beneficial, courageous conversations in our work this evening, and that we continue to take action for our community to provide safe education for all. The agreements of courageous conversations are to stay engaged, expect to experience discomfort, speak your truth, and accept a lack of closure. All right, so we'll go ahead and move along to item 2, approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Being there's no discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, aye.
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 And I heard 4 ayes.
Aye.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So So we'll go ahead and move forward with public comment. This evening, we are attempting to improve accessibility in a very short amount of time. So we've got some parameters this evening that hopefully more voices will be able to be heard this evening. So for public comment, if you'd like to provide public comment during this meeting, indicate in the Zoom chat by typing your name and indicate that you have a public comment, or you can also raise your hand feature on Zoom. When it's your turn to speak, please use the following guidelines. State your full name for public records, speak up to 3 minutes, and a turn per person per public comment. We'll have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and we'll also have another opportunity at the end of the evening. And thank you, Debbie, for going ahead and putting those parameters in the chat.
You're welcome.
All right, so we'll go ahead and begin with public comment. Is there any public comments?
We have one attendee. Hold on one second. I got to see who it is. Courtney Martinez. Also, as a FYI, Dr. Herndon is still trying to come in. He's in, but I can't promote him to panelist. So, all right, Courtney, I will go ahead and move you to panelist.
Thank you so much. I'd also before like to say that your chat is disabled, so people aren't going to be able to type in their name. All right, so for the public record, my name is Courtney Martinez. I'm a teacher at Thorndike Elementary, and I'm a parent of students at Showalter and Foster. I was in a meeting this last week where I was asked, do I feel safe at work? My response was immediately that while I may feel safe, others may not. And because of that question and because of my answer, I wanted to do some digging. This past week, I found that particularly on Thursday, 1/13, we had 57 students out from COVID illness and or COVID quarantine. Then Foster and Showalter closed. What we have been experiencing at the elementary level is that when one child is told to be home for remote learning or quarantine, siblings tend to stay home too. Today, we had a slight increase in our student absenteeism. Some of those students were siblings of Foster and Showalter students. However, this has not been unusual. We've often had many days where classes that typically have 19 kids only have 10 to 11 consistently show up. Today at dismissal, a parent of a kindergartner pulled me aside and said, what is happening? Is her 5-year-old moving to remote? Is she going to get less than 24 hours notice to scramble and find care for said 5-year-old? I told her that I was really sorry that I didn't have more information for her. I explained that I too had just heard this week that there was no plan for any school to go remote. And then not 2 days later, my children are going remote. I'm really tired. I'm tired as an employee, always being in crisis mode because there isn't a collective trying to be proactive, only reactive. I'm tired as a parent, not being told what's going on, or even worse, being told out of crisis planning. So then I'm forced to scramble and tend to the health and safety and now academics of my overall well-being of my children. Everyone in this country is tired. But the only way that this is going to get better is if everyone starts helping and working together to find solutions that might be out of the box instead of trying to fan flames to make fires burn bigger. I really appreciate your time this evening and thank you for reactivating your chat.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Do we have any other speakers?
I do not see any more hands up yet. And I've looked in chat as well. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's Carrie Stradley. Okay, Carrie.
Thank you so much. My name is Carrie Stradley. I'm an MLL teacher at Foster High School. I have two questions after some comments. My comment is that, we took these days off to protect our community, which we really need to do. And we will still need to do that when we return, no matter when that is. Every day, as I walk down the halls of Foster, I see students who are not wearing masks that the CDC and the Department of Health recommend that are safe, the K95 masks. Our students and families are immigrants and refugees. Many of them are, and they either don't have the ability to afford these masks or have access to them. So the district needs to provide these masks for our students regularly. Does the district have a plan to provide these masks? My second question is about communication to families, which I heard Ms. Martinez spoke about. How is the district reaching out to families who speak many languages? And how are you judging the effectiveness of the methods of that communication? As we all know, communication is absolutely paramount so families can plan and understand what's happening. And I'm worried that our families who need it the most are living in absolute confusion because they don't know what's going on. And that's an injustice to them. And we're not serving our communities that we often praise for being so diverse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Stradley. A reminder for community members who've just gotten on, we have the ability to give public comment at the beginning and end of the meeting. Indicate in the Zoom chat by typing your name and indicating public comment or raising your hand using the raise hand function. And you'll be promoted to the panel to be able to speak.
Okay, I have Jovita McConnell.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jovita McConnell. I have a daughter, two children, one in high school, one in the middle school. I'm a little taken back by how unorganized this entire school year has been. I'm taken back by the lack of communication, the lack of leadership. And this really didn't have to be this difficult. And it feels like we're 2 years into this, and it feels like we're on day one. I don't understand why surveys weren't sent out to parents last summer, asking parents, what do you want to do? If something happens where we're going to have to go back to remote, can you go back to remote after Christmas? Or
What is that?
things that where numbers are starting to rise up again? What is going to work for you? The communicating, I don't know if there was a survey. I know I didn't see one. I just don't understand why this wasn't better planned out and mitigate all the risks that possibly could have happened. And what lessons learned are we capturing now from each month that these kids have been back in school? What lessons learned are you guys capturing and thinking about next year and how to mitigate anything that's going to happen next year and being proactive? Because it feels very reactive, and then it feels like none of us parents aren't getting communicated to on what we need to do. And I understand not all kids can go home or aren't able to do that because parents are working or whatnot, but it just feels very unorganized. And I'm just taken back to, and I know all the schools are like this. I know everything's like this, but I just feel like we could do a better job. We could work on getting this taken care of correctly and done better for everybody, just to help each other out during these hard times. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McConnell.
I see nothing more in chat.
So I'll go ahead and in terms of public comment, kind of the parameters around public comment, it's a chance for community to voice concerns. Certainly feel free to ask questions. What will happen next is we'll move into discussion items. And as a board, we'll start also asking questions and hopefully too, these excellent questions will start to be worked on. Okay. So that's kind of how I guess the parameters around a public meeting will happen. And then of course, there'll be one more additional time at the end if people have follow-up concerns, feedback. What I'd like us to do, I'm going to first call out any other comments, concerns that anyone else would like to voice who's here tonight, our community. Got one more. Got two more.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please. It's Jennifer Castillo.
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Jennifer Castillo. I have a student at Showalter and one at Tukwila Elementary School. And this is not new. We, as community members and parents, have always been in the dark in this district. However, previously, we've been able to be in the schools, volunteering in the classrooms and with our students, and we were able to talk to other parents and get the information that we needed. We never, ever had to rely on the district for information because we never got it from them. And for those of you who've been around, we've gone through many superintendents where we did not get information. And here we are thinking we're going to get something new because Flip came in and told us, I'm going to communicate with you every week. We're going to tell you every week what's going on. And guess what? I haven't seen it. I don't know who's seeing it, but we're not. Prior to the beginning of this year, that you had a big meeting and said, email us all of your questions, ask your questions, we'll get back to you. I did exactly what I was told and zero follow-up, which unfortunately I'm not surprised about. The data for the COVID numbers were not updated until today. We've been frantically checking it all week to see what our students were up again. And again, nothing was updated. I'm completely sick and disgusted by the lack of communication from this administration. You've given us nothing. I do want to give a giant shout out to every single teacher at the middle school and to the teachers that my students have had at Tukwila Elementary School, who are always forthcoming with us and who protect my kids, and I trust every single day with them. But they're tired too, and they should not have to have this burden placed upon them. They shouldn't. And you guys need to listen to what they're saying, and they can't even give us information because you're not talking to them either. So that's all I have to say. Please, please communicate with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer. I think Jennifer just went. Laura Lindy.
Lindy.
Just 1 second here. Go ahead, Laura. Laura. Okay. Okay. We'll come back to Laura. Next one is Megan Johnson. Megan?
Yes, sorry, it took me a minute to unmute because it was asking me questions. So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Megan Johnson, and I am a second grade teacher at Thorndike Elementary. And I just had a concern that once again falls under the lack of communication. I have a son that is in the Auburn School District, and it has just been like very different night and day difference between the communication I receive as a parent from another district as opposed to a staff member working in another school district. And one of the things that also was brought to light with one of my students this past week is I had a student that had to leave early because a sibling had tested positive for COVID and the mom was waiting outside. So I walked the children outside and the mom looked at me and said, "What do I do now?" She had no idea what to do. And I said, "I have no idea. Let me ask to see like if there is a handout or a paper that has next steps." And I walked into the office and there is no paper. And so this parent now has a student that tested positive and another student who's unknown. And there's like no steps on like what is expected. My son was in close contact with a positive student at daycare. And when he got to his school, they called us and we had to pick him up. And we were given 2 pieces of paper, double-sided, on steps on what to do with a box if your child was a confirmed case, was identified as close contact, or had symptoms, and what to do. And at the very top, the nurse wrote like, test him on this day, and if it's negative, he can return on this day. And it was very useful. And I just feel like, I don't know, we're getting kids with symptoms and are sick, and parents are asking what to do, and we have no answers. And I feel like if other districts are doing this, like, why not reach out and just copy what they're doing? Like, I am more than happy to send these forms up from Auburn to Tukwila School District to use. I just think that it's really sad. And I have good rapport with that family, but it kind of makes us look like idiots as we are on the front lines as teachers. And so that is my concern, thought, opinion.
Thank you.
We've got Kimberly Goodman.
Yep. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I am just hoping and asking if during today's board meeting, if it's possible to discuss, actually, I ask that we discuss how the decision came to be about middle and high school going remote, and if elementary was discussed. I know I saw in the email that the decision was made not to include elementary. But as Courtney Martinez said, at Thorndike, our student and staff absences have been extremely high. And I'm just wondering if we could discuss how those decisions were made and if that's something to address. I know there's been a lot of talk on social media about why elementary is still in person. And I just think that's an important thing to be transparent about if we're to gain trust of the community, and for that matter, for the staff. So that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you.
So Laura Lindy is now on her computer.
I'm looking for her in the attendees. Okay, Laura.
All right, can you hear me this time?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Laura Lindy, and I'm a counselor at Foster High School. And I just really want to make sure that everyone is taking the mental health needs of our students and staff into account. And we've had so many students with some quite severe mental health issues this year, including many students hospitalized for that. And so I think it's just going to be really important to be as clear as possible and for people to feel safe. There's also many staff members are experiencing very high anxiety. And so I really think it's important to think about what will help our students and staff feel safe. So what are those predictable things? What things can be provided in a very unpredictable situation? And what kind of resources do we have? What kind of extra support can we have? Do we need to look at some other types of changes or structure? Everything that we've been through the last couple of years, and I think some of it is people thinking like, oh, it was going to be different, things were going to change, and then many of the students and staff have expressed it's like the same thing, nothing has changed, and many of them have expressed to me that they're not feeling cared for by the district, and so that's what I wanted to express. I am feeling very positive about our new administration, and very excited about where we can get to. So that's not a part of my concern at all. But there's a very real concern about our students, and a possible student could die by suicide, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can for people to feel safe as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any others at this time? There will be another opportunity for those. We've got some newer folks who've joined us this evening to give comment at the end. All right, let's go ahead and move along into discussion items. COVID-19 protocols. I'm thinking to frame this conversation, I would be interested in hearing from each of us in terms of what we're hoping to discuss or have discussed this evening. Whoever would like to begin.
I can start. I was trying to shift in my brain and think about how I wanted to start, I guess, as well. Okay, so Bridget, just to confirm, sorry, Director Pro, just to confirm, you want me to say what I'm hoping that Dr. Herndon will address, as nitty gritty as like specific questions, or just kind of big picture at the moment?
How about what would we like to discuss and have a clear understanding on in this meeting as well as after this meeting? How about that? Does that work for folks?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I think I can summarize it. thank you so much for those comments. A lot of them actually address some of the things that I was hoping for. So one particular thing around really understanding how the plan was made. So not just, we looked at this data, but really giving us some insight into kind of what the conversation was like and what was really being discussed and examined and explored. And then how the decision was made for secondary versus elementary, especially looking at some of those attendance numbers. The second piece is around communication. I want to walk away today with some clear, actionable steps about how we are going to communicate more effectively and what we are going to communicate effectively. And so I'm hoping that we can have some dialogue around that. Hear from Dr. Herndon, and then potentially have some additional, when we have that public comment, also hear from folks if there's something that we have missed around what should be communicated and what folks really need. And then I think I just have some clarifying questions around some misinformation and some things where things maybe aren't quite, there's some inconsistencies in some of the information that's being shared or data that's sent out. So I just want some clarity around some of those things. And then lastly is thinking about trying to be proactive here, as someone else has mentioned in their comment, around what is school going to look like, particularly for secondary folks when they come back, and how are we going to ensure that we have the supplies that we need. Again, some really clear actionable steps about what we need, how we're going to get it, and how we are going to help schools hold young people accountable for mask wearing and other things that are happening in schools, so that young people can feel safe and teachers can feel safe being in the building. So those are some kind of high level things. Hoping to have some time for specific questions later.
I think Carly verbalized what all of us would like to see happen this evening, so that we have well-defined protocols and procedures and a solid plan for communication, and making certain that we keep the health and safety of our students as well as our staff's mental well-being and social well-beings dealt with.
I can go next. Yeah, Carly, you set us on a good path. And the folks that the email you sent out to the board earlier today with all the outlines of what you were hoping to see tonight, I think goes into greater detail than what you just said, but I think that is what I'm looking for also. So we can push on some of those things as we go along. I think for me, how the decision was made, who was involved, what were the facts that suddenly flipped the switch, and if we're going to keep our elementaries in person, what are we doing extra for them? What are we doing for masks for them? What's happening at lunchtime? I mean, we're seeing that people can come back after 5 days of quarantine, but they have to wear their masks all the time. How do they have lunch? That kind of thing. So what are we doing in addition to what we had been doing to be able to stay in person if we're going to stay in person? And then in the communication plan, I really want detail on that. We're going to send out a memo once a week in our various languages to the students, the staff, and the families about what has happened in the last week and where we're looking for in this next week. And that I believe that should include the details of if we're remote learning, how kids sign on. So maybe the email or the mailing to the high school is going to look different than, the one for the elementaries. But I love that idea about having a flyer to hand to a family who comes to pick up a COVID positive kid or a kid that's being contact traced, And if we're not doing that, and we can't even assure our families that we're doing the contact tracing, how are we going to take care of that? I want in this communication plan where we are on our supplies. And I know that the supply pipeline is messed up, but I want to know where we're going to get stuff if we don't have it and what we're going to do if we don't have it. Because I don't think we've been clear on I don't think we've been very creative in that. And I also went in that I want in that communication plan some ideas about mental health care for both our students and our staff and families. And, you know, I love these public comments and folks helping us to see what we may not be paying attention to. I also want our public to help us to know how to fix these things. So Laura, Lindy, I'm with you on this mental health care. You know I am. But as a board member, I'm not sure what that looks like, what would really be helpful. So if when you give public comment, you can also, and maybe you did and I missed it, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call you out, Laura. I just so respect you. If you can also give us some ideas, does that mean extra staff? Does that mean extra time with students out of class? I mean, what does it look like? And of course, it doesn't look the same for every kid, but just some things that, you know, we might think of. So that's my list. Sorry, it took me so long to get that out.
Yeah, I think most of what has been said, I would agree with. The whole, obviously the communications, and certainly I'm always a big fan of learning from other districts and what's going on. Also the whole comment about working together, and I just kind of second Director Bolajak's ideas about, you know, we need to figure out how to get community staff input into these various processes. It's obviously, you know, in these times, saying that we want to set up another work group or whatever is probably going to be too cumbersome, but getting, whether it's through public comments or, you know, finding a few people that have really good ideas on this and kind of incorporating them into the process of decision making would be really good. Particularly the areas we've heard tonight, communication, obviously, and also the mental health issues, and kind of, you know, what does it look like when it's good, so that we can work on moving in that direction. And then, yeah, I did, you know, when I was looking at the data that was provided on the absences, I guess I didn't see, what I don't see is the absences for January, because obviously everything changed radically in January. So that's kind of the relevant data that I think that we need to see for particularly, well, yeah, the elementary schools. But and then the other things are, I think people kind of touched on it, the whole mask situation. There's been a lot of studies coming out recently saying how important the higher grade masks are, and so, you know, how we go about getting those not only to staff but probably just to students as well. And obviously working with our health department. I know that, I mean, the government, and then the other whole area is testing. So the governor's got a whole bunch of tests coming at schools here shortly. And, you know, do we have our testing protocols in good place that we could use, you know, effectively utilize all these tests that will be coming to schools, and how do we do that? So that's what I got. Thanks.
I was typing notes. I'll just put what I've got. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that I know I'm tired tonight, and I'm aware of so many families that are sick right now, that are scared right now, that are exhausted, and also honor those people who are fighting for their lives or have passed. So So I just want to acknowledge that. And I also want to acknowledge every single person is here who's not here, who shows up with courage and amazingness in our communities, rich with cultural wealth that continue to bring to the table amazingness. And so that's kind of the first thing I got to say off. And then for tonight, I want to, when this meeting's done, I want to feel clear COVID protocols for all in our community and checking with our community how it's going. How we need to improve and increase clarity on current responses and the next steps based on community needs, not only regional but we're really making sure we're responding to community needs. And we got a chance to start listening tonight to that. Increased effectiveness communication related to COVID and partnering with our families, community-based organizations in order to be effective. We cannot do this well alone. We cannot do this well within these existing hurtful structures at times. And so we have a lot of amazingness in our community, and let's start working together and partnering to make it happen. Use our richness of cultural wealth, and then action steps, updates for the process for all. Test an N95 mask for any community member that requests because of, I didn't get to finish, but because of symptoms or because of exposure. And then how will we make sure our community is feeling supportive? How will we know that that there's a response happening? So that's what I have tonight. And so I'll go ahead and pass the baton to Dr. Herndon and any other person that's presenting tonight.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I currently have like 3 devices open. For whatever reason, I cannot view everybody else. But so I'm using my different computer and phone, and so I just want to make sure I've got everything and people can hear me. I'm sorry my video isn't working. I literally have tried 3 different devices, so I don't know what's different, but there's something different for tonight. So first of all, I do appreciate all of the feedback, and you know, it is it's a difficult place to be, and I understand that I'm falling short of those expectations. So I have to own that. I have to do better, and hopefully after we go through some of these pieces, you'll see some of the steps that we're taking, I'm taking, and you know, we can improve on everything. So that's my hope for tonight too. I appreciate the outline. If we want to, my thought was to go through the first. So we kind of have these 4 questions, and my thought was to go to each one and then get your feedback as to what you see and see if there's anything that I'm missing or what I may be able to answer and fill in. Does that sound okay?
Can you clarify what those 4 questions are, or where you're seeing those? Oh, gotcha.
Just
Thank
on the
you.
agenda. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the first part is the approval of the district protocol and determining, so how did we get to pivoting to online? And why the middle schools, you know, and not the elementaries. So there's obviously been quite a bit of information out there, not only for quite a bit of news coverage about rising cases and how it's impacting school districts. So far this year, we have had a few classrooms or students have to isolate if they had tested positive, going through the COVID protocols from King County Department of Health. And those were also just recently updated. Obviously in October, end of October, November, we had the opportunity for students to start to get vaccinated. So that was seen as a tremendous effort to help keep students in school in person, knowing that that model was one that was so important to student learning for lots of reasons. Last year being completely remote for so long has had quite an impact on students in many different ways. Mental health, feeling isolated, as well as their actual academic progress. So having that ability was a big opportunity for us to hopefully keep them in school. In the fall, before we opened, we also established a memorandum of understanding with our labor partners to say, in the event that we do have to shift or pivot a classroom, whatever it may be, this is how we've outlined what that process will be. So there was some thought about what that would look like or what the steps would be. And as the fall had gone on, like I said, there were a couple classrooms that had to do that. The previous amount of quarantine time was 10 days, and then the King County Department of Health has just shortened that to a 5-day window, continuing to wear masks. In one of the recent articles in the last week, Seattle Public Schools had put out a couple of indicators about what they would consider, not hard and fast, about what would be kind of a number or a threshold that would bring into consideration the need to pivot a school into remote learning, because that was becoming a growing possibility with the rising of the Omicron variant and more people getting that infection, even if they had been vaccinated. So we put in here what Seattle Public Schools has had, an absent rate at the elementary school of 50%, secondary schools at 40%, so that's student absent rate. Also a possibility would be a 10% of core student and staff positivity rate. So that's 10% if either the student population or the staff in a particular school testing positive, more than 10%. A percent, a mix of unfilled positions in a school that creates unmanageable operational and or safety risks. And with that, they talked about 50 to 100% of school leaders or COVID site supervisors that may be absent due to a confirmed COVID case. So these are all some of the indicators that we had. We didn't outline any of these particular indicators, but every day we do look at the student absent rates and the staff absent rates, and then our ability to fill those particular absences. So on a regular basis, as we did pre-pandemic and as we've been doing all fall, staff who are out either because they have a COVID illness or a different illness, they submit that they will be absent. Some submit the night before, sometimes they're planned ahead of time, and we have a substitute pool then that we can deploy to cover those classrooms. In some cases, absences pop up really early the morning of. So there are times where we get additional absences, or we don't have additional absences, but a substitute hasn't signed on to cover the class. So we have some unfilled positions. So for this week, some of these factors leading into this was we were seeing rising absence rates of students and staff. The biggest difference was also the inability for us to have enough substitutes to cover the unfilled classes. And so when we don't have coverage of a substitute, then there are a couple of methods that we use. We sometimes ask staff to cover, and that can become extremely taxing on them for sure. You know, they give up a prep period, they cover up class. Sometimes we combine classes, and you know, that's extremely draining. It's tough on students, it's tough on staff. It's very difficult to do that over and over again. There are times where people can do it for a day or two, but to consistently do it is challenging. So that ability was tough. The other part of us coming back in the fall, part of our procedures are that if we want to have masks available, which we do have plenty of masks, we're Right now, we have 2,000 KN95 masks in stock, and we have, I think it was 3,500 N95 masks. The N95 masks need to be fitted to a person. So we have to have staff who have the training on how to do the proper fitting. And so we have KN95 masks. Those are not required to be fitted. We have 2,000 of those in stock right now. So we could hand those out to staff or students if they're available. We need to just make sure that we just get them in there. So we will make sure that those are available by the time we come back, and in the elementary schools, we can make sure that those are available. Anytime anyone requests one, we'll have them delivered to the classroom. We can start by having those next week delivered in classrooms, so they're just there. Teachers can have a stock of them in their classroom. The hang up has been on tests. So that was another indicator this week about the shift. We've been using tests to respond to any students or staff who may have come to school but then are presenting symptoms. And so we use the tests available on hand to then, if the student or staff has symptoms, they go to the isolation room, we give them a test. And then based on that test, we, let them know if they're positive or negative, and then implement whatever the next step is for them based on that result. So our test supply, we've been able to replenish those supplies on a fairly regular basis. The order that we had an order of 600 tests that were supposed to come in earlier this week, and they didn't arrive. So they were supposed to arrive on Tuesday, they didn't arrive on Tuesday, and our supply of tests was dwindling, and there was no indication about when these tests were going to arrive. And so by the time we got to Thursday, all those combination of factors were there. We didn't have tests at the secondary school to respond to any needs that we had. Our substitutes were low. We didn't have enough substitutes to cover. And those indicators for us were like, well, we can't continue to pull this off. At the elementary level, it was a little bit different. Thorndike, for sure, is higher in the percentages of both staff and student absenteeism. Cascade View and Tukwila Elementary are not as high, but we have been tracking those. We do have that information that we'll put up online. I realized that some of the data last week was not getting updated. We had some challenges with the site host that we had, so any data online was not getting updated. But we will be posting those on a regular basis, daily, so that people can see where we are on that. So once I met with the cabinet about where we stand, I check in with HR every day to ask, where are we on substitutes? How are we on coverage? And then based on some of those answers, sometimes we cover within the building, sometimes we have central office staff go out. There are times where we might shift the substitute from one building to another if that substitute is not needed in one particular location. All of a sudden something happened, they weren't needed. But our pool was becoming diminished and we couldn't continue to do that. So I spoke with cabinet about all of these factors. Do we have tests available? When are the tests arriving? I knew we had masks, but tests are a big deal. What's our prospect of substitutes? When I was learning that some of the folks in our substitute pool were also out sick or had COVID positive, we knew they were going to be out several days. So this was becoming a greater impact to the secondary schools. And so I spoke with the cabinet, all my staff folks. I spoke with the association lead just about her ideas of looking at our MOU. And then did get some feedback. I got some emails and calls from a few board members and looked at that prospect too. So rather than just cancel school and say, hey, we're going to cancel, let's play it day by day. I felt it was better to cancel for Thursday, make the switch to remote, or make the announcement on Thursday to cancel for Friday, switch to remote because we still don't have a timeline for when our tests are coming. And without the tests, we can't do what we need to do to make sure that we can respond if a student or staff is presenting symptoms. And I don't have a response yet on when our substitutes will be out of their quarantine time either. So those two things allow us to take the resources that we do have and put those to the elementary level so that we can staff those as much as we can. So we don't have open positions, so that we have tests available for students and staff that may be presenting with symptoms at the elementary level. And we have masks available that we can put there. So we have 2,000 available, the KN95 masks, 3,500 plus of the N95 masks, but those need to be fitted. We're ordering another 4,000 KN95 masks so that we can have those. I don't have a deadline yet on when those are coming in. We have an additional order. I talked to Puget Sound ESD today, and they're doing a bulk order. So I asked for 4,000 tests for Tukwila so that we can have those for next week. And then that way, as we get closer later in the week, I'll address one of these later about when to make an assessment if we have to extend remote learning, because we can't do that if we don't have the PPE available, tests available. I should hear back in the next day or two, and that is over the weekend. What I'd heard from PSCSD is that they are physically picking them up either Sunday or Monday. And then I should get a call either later tonight or tomorrow. So as soon as I know, I would know if we're getting tests in. And then I can actually pick them up. I have a truck, so I can go pick them up on Monday, if that's the case, if they're actually in, go to the Puget Sound ESD and pick up our 4,000 tests, if we're getting that many. I don't know how many will actually receive. So I'm still awaiting some of those items from Puget Sound ESD. So that's the first part on number one. So that's how I made that determination. The groups that I spoke to will continue to monitor the attendance data and coverage data for the elementary schools. We do know that going remote for the elementary schools poses an impact on families for the ones who are not in the protocols and having to find coverage or childcare as well. It's a really big impact. It's not to say it's not an impact at the secondary schools, but it's a little bit different at the elementary schools. So that's what I have for number one.
Let's go ahead and pause for a moment in case we have follow-up questions. Anyone want to follow up with questions?
I have two questions. One of them is on the K95. My understanding was that there wasn't a child size. So do we actually have elementary sized K95s?
I'll check to see if we have multiple sizes. I don't know that offhand, but
Okay.
if we don't, then in our order for KN95s, we can get some KN95 smaller editions.
Yeah, I thought I heard that that didn't exist.
Yeah, I'm not, and if we don't, then we would have to do the N95 fittings for them. So we'd have to have someone fit an N95 to them.
Okay. All right. I can't remember what my other question is, so that's good.
My question is related to families that have kids in different schools or in different classrooms within the same building. How are parents notified that the sibling has been in close proximity or needs to quarantine? Because I'm curious about how that's happening and how we're making sure that siblings or other members of family systems who are within close proximity or living together are all aware of and are doing safety protocols of quarantining. So that's my first question. My second question is, I learned this week that in one of my scholars' classrooms, there had been 6 confirmed positives in a class that she attends daily, and I was not notified. And so I know she's been in that room for, you know, every day. And so I'm just kind of curious how community members will actually know that their kid, that, you know, that there were positive in classes, that we should really be watching, and all, you know, if there's symptoms, or should we go get our child's tested. So those are kind of from the lens of family. I'm looking at it through the family lens right now.
Right. Yeah. Those are great questions. So the first part on notifying for siblings, if there is a test positive, so if I give an example, I just want to make sure I'm kind of painting the right picture on an example. So let's say, for instance, that you have a child that is in an elementary, a middle, and a high school, and your child at the elementary level may have been exposed to a child in their classroom. How do they get the notification about, does the school then get informed about the siblings that would be at the middle school and the high school based on the contact with the elementary student? Is that the kind of, is that a proper scenario?
Yeah, because I think we have to take in consideration that we have many families that are in multiple, like in the same school, but multiple rooms. But then we also have families that have students in 2 or 3 schools right now. And so if we're closing down schools because there's concerns with positive cases, in terms of thinking about this, I'm thinking strategically that the cases, there's still lots of risk going on there.
Sure. Yeah, I will, what I have to do is, we did receive earlier this week new protocols from King County Department of Health about both contact tracing. They have done a bit of a shift on where to prioritize the contact tracing, because they've heard from school districts that it's quite laborious to do the contact tracing, and from thousands and thousands of those contact traces throughout the state that's happened all fall, the amount of additional information or the resulting positive cases out of that is really small. So they have prioritized the places where they feel that contact tracing based on that data. And I don't have all that data because it's a little bit different in each place. Each district does their own data. So they just gave us a broad brush about where it was. They felt that the effort should be just focused on some of the areas that are higher risk. So things like outside or cafeterias, they didn't deem those as higher places where transmission happens. It's in the closer quarters. So I'll have to take a look at those protocols to see where they are. And then they changed the quarantine time as well. So obviously the quarantine time is important based on how that impacts the entire family, and whether or not a student, so if in this scenario, if the student was middle school or high school and the elementary student is having the quarantine, the middle school and high school student is probably supposed to quarantine as well, because they're in the same household with a student who had a possible contact trace. And then that obviously impacts the attendance of the middle school and the high school, even though those students may or may not, and they haven't tested positive. But then this also gets back to our ability to test those students. So if the middle school and high school students say, look, my younger sibling was possibly exposed at the elementary level, I'd like to take a rapid test to know whether or not I have it. We would want to be able to do that, and then they could continue on. That's my understanding, especially if they were vaccinated and they continue to wear their mask at school. So that was, yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Hurt. I was just gonna say, until we as in every single student, every single family has, every single staff has those clear parameters of how to quarantine. What if another person in another school, like, because I have not been given those. I have not even, I was given the information by a colleague. And so, you know, it's like, no, and so I have privilege to have that. And until every one of our families, including our families in the elementary schools right now, have those, I don't believe it's safe. Because especially as there's been rapid changes in protocols, we should not expose our children, staff, and families to possible harm until we have clear, and not only we have it, they have it. They have those clear protocols to understand and know and feel safe. And so I'll stop there. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Yes. And no, go ahead.
Okay, I just had 2 points. One is, are those supplies enough when we have about 3,000 people that have needs, including staff and students? Are those supplies going to be ample? And are we remembering that the Tukwila School Foundation has offered to assist in supplying for our needs?
Yeah, I mean, again, we try and replenish on a weekly basis the materials that we have. So that's what we have. We put in another order for masks. For the testing, again, we try and resupply as much as we can. And some people come with their own masks. So we have these available for people who need them, students or staff who need them. And for the testing, we have done those only for students or staff who are presenting symptoms. We're not doing a mass testing of everybody. There is a methodology for that. That's called that was the Test to Stay program where some school districts were participating. They were testing everybody every week. But some of those districts, I don't believe, are going to be able to continue to do that because they don't have enough tests to be able to do that all the time. So that's a challenge. But we do reorder our masks weekly, so we should have those available all the time as they come in.
So since we haven't in the past, is it possible to be ordering more than we perceive that we might need?
We do try and order we don't wait until we're down to the bottom. I mean, we usually have enough. We also have to be able to store all these pieces and the test, making sure that they're still effective.
Okay. And can we please keep in mind the Children's Foundation who so graciously offered supplies and for assistance with our communication?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Take as much of that as possible.
So I have a few questions. A few are just kind of hopefully simpler questions to answer. So you mentioned that folks need to be specifically trained on fitting those N95 masks. Who all in our district currently is trained on how to fit those?
Let me see if I've got someone on staff who can answer that question.
I can answer that question, Dr. Hernon. We have trained special ed teachers. We have trained every single nurse and every single person that uses an N95 mask. We have the whole custodial staff had been trained on the use of that. At the moment, we have been using one person in school district to train people on how to wear the mask, and he's using the LNI information to train other people.
Thank you so much. Is that does that have to be an in-person training? Like what is the process for that? Like, is it?
For the process, I have to have, it's in-person training.
Okay, so it could be online or?
In-person training.
Oh, you said it is in person. Okay, sorry.
It's in-person training. We provide a video and then we actually need to supervise how the mask needs to be placed in the person's face. Yeah, we can open more clinics. We had to schedule and figure it out who are the people who would like to use the N95 mask, and then prepare clinics and then provide training for that. At the moment, we have only one person doing the training for the district.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Herndon, I wonder if it would be beneficial to maybe do a pulse check with all of our staff across the district and see who might be interested in getting fitted for a KN95 mask, sorry, not a KN95, an N95 mask. Just put that ask out there for folks. So thank you for providing us with a number on how many masks we currently have. One question that I know will come up later as we're talking about communication, but I did want to name here, there seems to be a disconnect in supply and communication around supply. So there were several folks that we heard from that they were unaware that we had any masks. And so there just seems to be a breakdown in communication. So I'm hoping we'll address that later. Curious around tests, how many do we have right now on hand in our district?
Let me see if I've got someone who can answer that. I know for the secondaries, we were down to probably 30 or 40 tests, again, with nothing else coming in sight.
On Tuesday, that was when we had that number?
I think Wednesday, we were down to about 30 or 40. But I don't know if Nurse Maestro's on or not.
Hello, yes. So the high school, I believe, has about 80 tests now. We were able to get some tests from one of the board members. Each of the elementary schools has about 20. And then I believe the middle school is at our lowest. We have only about 5 to 10 left over.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any idea, Ms. Maestro, how many tests we've administered this week?
Gosh, not specifically for this week, but I do know that on average, each of the elementary schools administer between 20 to 40 tests each day. And then the middle and the high schools are a bit higher because of athletics. Both vaccinated, unvaccinated student athletes and their trainers and coaches must get tested 3 times a week. So on top of the 20 to 40 tests that we administer for the students, there will also be another 30 to 40 athletes in the high school specifically, and that's 3 times a week.
Whew, okay, thank you so much. So just to make sure I heard that right, we're administering about 20 a week per elementary school?
No, we're out at per day. Per
day.
Okay. And that would be for 20 to 30 per day, and that's for all of the schools across. And then plus 30 each 3 times a week for the middle and high schools for athletics.
Okay, thank you so much. So now I'm going to kind of shift to going back to, again, kind of how we got to the decision around secondary versus elementary. So now knowing that currently, as of today, the elementary schools, there are 60 total tests, 20 at each school. If we're administering between 20 and 30, that means we have about 1.5 to 2 weeks of supplies, perhaps, actually, no, sorry, a day, that's per day. So 2 days worth of tests in the elementary level. And if I'm looking at the attendance numbers correctly, that was actually shared with us as a board. So I want to go ahead and just share a little bit because it hasn't, well, it actually did get just updated recently for today, but throughout the district, it looks like, and please, Dr. Herndon, if my math is wrong on any of these, please correct me. I'm not a super math person. But we had 31% of our students out at Thorndike Elementary on Monday, the 10th, and 31% out at Foster on Wednesday. So thinking about the amount of student absences that we have and the fact that we have the same percentage out at an elementary school right now as we do a secondary school, and we're administering more tests in the elementary than we have, just kind of help me understand why we chose not to, again, close at least one of the elementary schools, perhaps, because still the supply and demand is not quite equivalent when we have the same percentage of absences.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think the amount of testing has increased based on the absence rate. But the average of tests being administered across the elementaries was there. And again, we had limited supplies at the middle and high school for tests. So we figured we would shift those to the elementary level to be able to respond to that demand. Again, we're looking at this every day. And if we don't get tests in if I don't have an answer about tests coming in on Sunday or Monday, then there's a good possibility that we might have to shift unless our other shipment that we were expecting of 600 tests were to arrive. So that the ability to administer tests is definitely an important factor in this.
Right. Which I guess is why I brought this up, because it sounds like we don't even have enough tests for, on average, if we've been administering 20 per day at all 3 elementary schools, and we only have 60 left, we've got 2 days worth of tests.
Right.
So I'm just, again, supply seems to be low there as well. So again, I'm having trouble connecting those dots about, like, I'm not quite understanding still how that situation is so different. But that's okay. Yeah. One other question that I had in relation to this specifically is what other creative, and this was one of the questions that I asked you today in the email, what creative short or long-term solutions, structures, so like maybe how we're structuring instruction into potentially hybrid models. I don't even know what those could be, but what other structures or configurations were discussed prior to make the decision to put 2 schools fully remote? And then what is being considered for future decisions?
Sure. In the past, so we haven't really looked at an in-between model. When we were originally starting kind of parts of the pandemic, we were last spring getting to finally that place where we had moved from full remote to hybrid. And part of that was also coming from the governor saying that families that wanted to have in person needed to have in person. So there are challenges with doing hybrid instruction, having simultaneous instruction in person and online. That has been a challenge. So we didn't talk about a hybrid piece. We were following the agreement that we currently have. It's something that I think we could consider moving forward if we were to have something that would be extended. But again, having people in person, we would still want to make sure that we can have enough supplies to allow students to be in person so we could respond with the PPE pieces, testing, masks. And if we didn't have those available, then I don't think we'd be able to have students there, because if they're presenting symptoms, we want to be able to test with them.
Yeah, and I think at this moment in time, I think the idea of, like, I think this is something that we should think about for the future. Again, how can we maybe perhaps be creative, implement some of the opportunities that were in that bulletin from the superintendent around options for some sort of hybrid or some other configurations, because we know that there are unintended outcomes no matter which decision we make as a district, right? If we go fully remote, that's going to impact a lot of families, a lot of students. If we stay in school, that's impacting a lot of families and a lot of students. So neither situation is ideal. And so I really, really encourage us to think about how we can adapt and come up with a really creative model with our community, even perhaps, to ensure that we are meeting the needs of everyone. Whatever that might look like, I'm not the expert in that. You are. So, okay, that was that. Let me see if there was another. Okay, I think just generally speaking, I'm curious kind of around the So the SPS indicators there that they shared, I'm curious kind of what discussions maybe happened again and what was considered in just adapting those. Like how did we cater those to ensure that they're meeting the needs of our district? Because Seattle Public Schools is a much larger district than ours, and they have different needs than we do. So how are those adapted to meet our needs versus just kind of copy pasting from SPS?
Yeah, and I didn't say that those would be, new pieces for us, or those are the guidance. I just said in general, these seem like pretty good barometers. So I didn't use those numbers necessarily to make this decision. I was just looking at what are our rates looking like? Are they climbing? Are they falling? And do we have the ability to respond with the supplies that we have to those pieces? So certainly I've seen those, and looking at those as I think about how they kind of went through that and maybe came up with that. I had a brief conversation with their superintendent, Brent Jones, and he had talked about how they had conversations about how these seemed to be, the ones for them that they felt they could respond to. So you're 100% right. Seattle's a much larger district, having worked there previously for about 5 years. They have a very different needs throughout the city that vary dramatically. So for us, this is, again, something that we would look like. I think they're good barometers, but I don't know if they're the right numbers for us. I want to look at how are we trending in general? Are we going up? Are we going down? And do we have the needs to meet there? Do we have staff that can cover classrooms? Do we have tests that will let us know whether or not people are positive or negative? Do we have masks available for people to have masks if they forgot one, or if they're not wearing one, and we can hand them one? So those are my main drivers. Can we deliver on all of those pieces?
Dr. Bowerjack.
Any other questions, or shall we keep trucking here?
I guess one of my questions is, Dr. Herndon, are there essentials in each school, like the nurse? We've got 2 admins out at the high school. That leaves 1 principal in a setting that usually has 3. I understand we've had some nurses out from the schools, so they didn't even have that resource there. Are there essentials like that make it pretty, even though it doesn't necessarily affect the absentee rate, but might that be a different consideration?
Oh, yeah.
And how are we covering for that, or what are we doing?
Yeah, it's an
What can we
excellent
do?
question. Yeah, it's an excellent question. And it's kind of the last, that's one of the
That's what that is.
last indicators there is that 50 to 100% of school leaders. So what we have done is central office folks have usually gone to cover for administrators who may be out. That's been happening. The nurses are a different story. Not every building has a full-time nurse to begin with, which is obviously a challenge. And we had several that, one that had a planned absence already coming up, one who was in COVID protocols, or 2 that were in COVID protocols. And then we had 2 agency folks who were supposed to cover in that event, but they also were not able to cover. So, we're hoping that then, again, if we don't have nurse coverage at the middle schools for this next middle school and high school for this next week, we can use whatever nurse FTE we have to help address needs at the elementary school. But yes, those are some of those additional staff that support the health and safety within a school. If we're missing those, that's an important piece too. But that's a place where also we might shift or have someone from a building split some time so that we can continue to do that and cover the needs within the building.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Dr. Herndon, move along to the next one, please.
Okay. Number 2, the 5 CDC protocols and safety procedures. So I mentioned this a little bit before. There's a whole lot of information on this that we have in there. But to kind of boil it down to this, The CDC, and then following suit, the State Department of Health and King County Department of Health both have updated their protocols for the safety features as they apply to K-12 schools. This includes quarantine time, masking, vaccinations, whatever that may be. And they vary. Again, this also impacts the contact tracing, when that needs to happen, who that needs to happen with, based on your level of exposure and your level, basically your vaccination status. So those were updated. We got wind of those updates last Friday, and then actually had the video seminar with State Department of Health and King County Department of Health on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, and they sent out the actual brochures and flyers to us to let us, see kind of in more concrete terms what that looks like. So we have those now available, and we'll be following those same protocols as they've been updated. So this outlines the isolation and CDC isolation quarantine guidance. It isolates it talks about isolation for all people with COVID-19. It also talks about the school-based testing. Again, this is based on, our tests that are available. And the King County Department of Health was very clear about any test you get, whether it be a rapid test or a PCR test, or any test is a valid test. So she wanted to stress that, to say, any test you give, the results of that are valid results, they're valid tests. They also talk about the social distancing, and we're no longer doing the attestations. If some people remember last spring, as students came to school every day, they basically had to sign a sheet that said, hey, we're okay, I don't have any symptoms. So that was a process that took a little bit longer to check students in. We don't have to do that anymore, but we still encourage students, staff, or parents, if they are experiencing or witnessing symptoms, that they let someone know, and then we can have them move to our isolation room. We can give them a quick test, or a parent can come and get them tested if they would rather do that. We've been holding vaccination clinics and booster clinics every 3 weeks, or roughly every 3 weeks. We were supposed to have one in January, but the supplier that we had normally used, Costco, didn't know for sure whether or not they would have enough vaccines or boosters for us. So we're trying to coordinate and find an additional supplier there for us. So, and then let's see, just talking about some of the FDA approvals for Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. So that took place in the fall. None of those are new, but really the quarantine time and where we're doing the contact tracing have changed in the procedures from King County Department of Health.
So Dr. Herndon, in regards to if you can roll up a little bit to the quarantining, there is something about a rapid test.
Yes.
Let's see here. Let's see, looking for the little ones. Single dose, can you scroll down just a little bit? Quarantine, student, teachers, staff come in close contact with someone with COVID-19 need to be quarantined for at least 5 days after their last close contact if they are in any one of the following groups. And so it talks about the booster, single dose, are not vaccinated or have not completed primary vaccine series. Students, teachers, staff who come in close contact with someone with COVID-19, let's see here, ages 18 and older. So that one there about they are not vaccinated or have not completed primary vaccine series. Students, teachers, and staff who come into close contact do not need to quarantine. Let's see here. So that, I guess that's the other thing. Do we know who is of our students, who is and who is not?
I'll let Nurse Maestro answer that. We do know for our staff, obviously.
Yes, so we we go ahead and confirm whether or not a student has their vaccines or not through our immunization system, WAIIS. And that's what we've been using to confirm those vaccines.
So that is another factor that just in terms of quarantining, yeah, I mean, and then in terms of just in family homes, if are people wearing their masks all the time in family homes for the last 2 days, and if someone comes down with symptoms 2 days later, 3 days later, risk there. I'm just really concerned. I feel that every single one of our students, families, and staff in our district ought to have clear parameters before we continue forward. And I would support a pause for all our district for next week, at least until communication can happen for all students, all staff, and families to know what's happening, what we're doing, who's trained, who needs training, how to quarantine, all that. It would be part of thinking proactively. Things like that would need to be in place first for our community.
So the only answer I would say to that is, I think the quarantine and isolation guidelines have been clear to parents about what they need to do. This is definitely a shift, an update. So we do need to communicate that. And again, I would say, looking at the testing piece that we have available, and if people have symptoms, then, certainly they should not be coming to school. And we have been watching those rates and looking to see what we get for positive tests. We do have data on the number of students who test positive when they're in school, and we've been keeping track of that as well.
So I know I shared with you a little bit of my just curiosity and concern about how we're going to operationalize the 5-day quarantine and the 5-day return with constant mask wearing, particularly at lunchtime. And I know Dr. Bolerjack mentioned that at the top. And I think it just is worth stating that just because it's in the guidance doesn't mean that we can't offer more guidance than what is in the state guidance. So if it's something that works better for our school and for our district. So I'd love to hear if you've had the opportunity to think a little bit about how we can implement meal times in our schools when folks return next week or when folks return to secondary, how we can ensure that folks aren't walking around with COVID with their mask off because they've returned to school on day 6. And then I bring up Lunchroom specifically because for 2 reasons. One, the fact that it's now a low priority area is pretty wild to me. And I'm no scientist. I'll leave that to other folks, but it's just that makes no sense to me how the indoor meal space, particularly when I don't believe we're consistently keeping 3 feet to 6 feet between students in the lunchroom. And I was really fortunate enough to receive some feedback or to receive some information that came from a student survey that went out at the high school. And there was a lot of feedback, particularly around meal space and how the feelings of unsafety and uncertainty in those times specifically. So I'm really concerned about that particular piece, and I'd love to address that a little bit.
Yeah, I did chat a little bit today with Principal Blanton at Foster about that, as well as Ms. Cardenas about that. And Showalter Middle School has been having some dining indoors and outdoors. Again, I think that the reason why they have shifted that particular piece is, I know it seems, again, I'm not a scientist either. I'm not an epidemiologist. And I don't see all the information that King County Department of Health has, but the data that they are seeing and where transmission happens, they're saying that's not one of the high priority places. So I find that very interesting as well. Through contact tracing, that's what they've determined. It doesn't mean that we can't do more to make people feel safer and spread out a little bit more. And I think that's something that we'll talk about with staff and students next week to say, what can we work on for mealtime spaces that might help out more. For elementary schools, kind of the same thing. I mean, if we can do that, space them out a little bit more, I think that will be helpful. Obviously, students coming back from their quarantine, we want to make sure that they've tested negative. If that's the case, another reason why we want to make sure we have enough tests available. So if they've completed their quarantine, that's one of the pieces I would say I would want to continue with is even if a student is vaccinated and they've done their 5-day quarantine, I'd love to have them take another test to make sure that they're negative. But I want to make sure we have enough tests to be able to do that, because I think that would add a level of feeling better about that and feeling safer. And we would know that the students are not testing positive for COVID.
It certainly could. I will say that, like, from things that I've heard and in the experience, that folks can test positive months after. And so that could potentially end up being an undue burden and keeping young people out a lot longer. So I'm hoping there might be a balance there. And so one other thing around quarantining, again, because like this is the guidance, and I think that we can have potentially higher standards depending on what we feel is best for our staff, for our community, for our students, and what's currently happening in schools right now, right? We can get a sense for the fact that, young people have a hard time wearing their mask, right? So maybe we have a little bit of a stricter quarantine or isolate, I don't know. But anyway, how are we supporting families potentially who, and this kind of goes back to the sibling questions that came up earlier, who maybe potentially want to quarantine their kids for longer, or if in the event that someone who is vaccinated comes in close contact with someone, they don't have to quarantine. But what if I choose to, because I want to make sure that I'm not unknowingly impacting other people's health. So how are we ensuring that those folks are getting resources to engage in remote learning, which I know we still need to address how we're currently engaging the young people who are out on quarantine, but how can we support those families who need that extra time or want that extra time without impacting their absenteeism rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're not in school, technically, even if they're quarantined, they're still counted as absent because they're not in school. Which is fine because, we know that they're out for that particular reason. It's not something that's harmful. It's another data point to say, yeah, we have this student out, they're quarantined. For the ones who are staying home for that reason, just because they want to be extra safe, that's fine too. If Mr. Howard's on, I'll have him speak to how we connect with students who are out on quarantine.
And I'll also just note, there's an attendee that's interested in public comment. We will have public comment as soon as this discussion is complete.
And Ted is a panel, is an attendee, not a panelist.
Has he been able to be moved yet into panelist?
Yes, several times. There's just some glitches with it. So I'm going to do the allow to talk for Mr. Howard option. That seems to work.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Howard.
Can you hear me? Testing.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
I didn't get a chance to hear the question that was raised. I apologize.
So the question is about how we connect students with their learning when they're out on quarantine, or if they select to go out on quarantine, to be extra cautious.
Yeah, me and Jeff Baker have been working together to actually devise a plan. Not only will they get their laptop, their Chromebook, we will work with the Google Classroom to open that up and actually try to assist the students and parents the best we could around some of the best practices around synchronous and asynchronous learning. It's no replacement for being in the classroom, not even close. But the best we have at this time with the digital platform is to use the Chromebooks and the Google Classroom, and teachers will do their best to take what they do day in and day out and try to do that remotely with the students. And so those, the Chromebook is what usually happens with our students. Now, if students need additional help, we also have varsity tutors that are available for students, and that is one-on-one tutoring that's available for their students, and that's K through 5. And then we have AHA Learning for 6 through 12. Now that we have hired quarantine specialists for the buildings, they are taking the pressure off the teachers to actually organize and be able to help support the students in the learning and continuing learning. Even if they come back in the classroom and they continue to need some support, they will continue to be able to be tutored where the areas the teachers determine that they still need support in. So those are the other two pieces that we have in place for our students who continue to need support. And we can continue to reflect on that and build on that as we go out throughout the year.
And that's really vital information that we need to have in our protocols.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now, now that we've signed the MOUs with the companies, right now that's out into the schools, and you'll start seeing it more robust now that we have the quarantine specialists. It's pretty hard to do when teachers are trying to do that too, but now the quarantine specialists have been hired and in place. They will take that burden off teachers and be able to be the go-between, and then the family liaisons will also assist with identifying and supporting kids and making sure they get the support they need as well through the tutoring services that we've contracted with.
So just for clarification, that's in the elementaries right now. The high schools are virtual with their regular teachers. Is that?
AHA Learning supports 6 through 12.
Yeah, I heard that, but I mean,
and K through 5 varsity tutors supports our students K through 5.
Right,
That's in addition to their teachers. So
Okay.
at the secondary level, they will have their regular teachers.
Virtual. Okay.
Yeah, virtual.
It's my understanding that the tutors are being used for contact tracing and not being given time to tutor. Is that?
No, the tutors for the company are virtual.
The quarantine specialists, I believe.
I'm sorry?
The quarantine specialists. Is
Are,
that right, Director Morris?
Yes, thank you.
I missed the first part. What's happening with the quarantine specialists?
They're being used for contact tracing rather than what they're supposed to be doing, not supporting learning.
Okay.
That's a concern.
I think we all have been doing all sorts of things that that go above and beyond what was on our list during this time of the pandemic. You know, I'm watching and hearing all of us do that, from board members to administrators. We're doing it all. So whatever it takes to make sure our kids get what they need. So I appreciate that from everybody. But yeah, I'm assuming the yes.
I'm really you know, based upon what you shared, Dr. or Mr. Howard, I totally agree that staff is doing way more than what's feasible, what's effective, what's sustainable, that we're in very much crisis mode. And so I don't want our teachers to have to cover class after class after class after class, day in, day out. 3 months ago, I visited a school, and then at the front desk, there was a para educator who was covering front desk, who also was online with a class or something. There was something else happening at the front office. And then I went for a meeting, and the person that I was going to be meeting with was covering a class. And so it's like, in my mind, if this is what's happening, to me, that's crisis. We're at crisis if that's what's happening. And if it's been happening for 3 months and somehow this is the norm and this is okay, it is not okay. It is not okay for our staff. It is not okay for our children. It is not okay. It just isn't okay just to keep a school open in crisis. We ought to be very intentional. And as Director Hoover had mentioned, innovative, and to not go at it alone. Let's bring in community. Let's bring in community, like Mr. Howard, you had mentioned the community partners to sort of, help with this, but we need more. We need more than that. And we need to hear from the people who are most impacted, so that if there are things happening, we need an ongoing process to hear how's it working for folks. And so those are just my thoughts. I want to do a point of order, and because I want to honor time. We are beyond the 7:30 marked time. We have only gotten through the second item on the discussion, and have announced to the community that there's public comment at the end of the meeting. So I just asked for the board, thoughts about, do we pause here? Do we honor the community comment for now? Do we continue the conversation? So I'll stop, and I just want to hear from the board how to proceed.
I'd like to see us honor the public comment. But I do have a quick question for Ted. Is there a specialist in each building, or just in a secondary?
No, there's been Aaron would probably be the best person to answer that question, but my understanding is there's been a quarantine specialist hired for each school.
Thank you.
I also, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Carly.
I also most definitely want to honor public comment. I also want to state that I feel like there's still a lot of things that we need clarity on, and still a lot of things that I believe the folks that are on this call need clarity on. But I most certainly want to hear from them right now. That's more important than the questions that I could continue to ask. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to hear from them, but I want us to set a time to get back together and do the other half of this agenda.
How about Monday night? Oh, that's a holiday. We can't do Monday night. I don't know. What are our options, folks?
I mean, if I can just chime in, there are a couple of things on here that I just want to make sure people know, especially around the community listening sessions and other sessions that I have listed on this document. So one of those I want to get out probably tomorrow morning, just to alert people to the fact that there'll be an opportunity for a community listening session on Tuesday, the 26th from 5 to 6, and then another one on January 20th. During the family night that the family liaisons will be available. I did speak with that department talking about seeing if family liaisons could do both nights, and their feedback was only one night is best because it's too much for those particular communities. So I'll be doing 2 sessions next week on that, and then also a listening session with staff. So I just wanted to get to those particular pieces if we were gonna end up sunsetting, coming back a different night, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm planning on doing those items.
So could we meet at after that listening session on Tuesday?
That's up to you. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't, there's a possibility that it goes longer. So that's the only thing I'm just concerned about. I want to make sure that I can hear what folks are saying. If it needs to go longer than an hour, I want to make sure I can do that.
So what about 6:30?
Sure. I mean, if you can put a time down there, I now try and get there. I'm just, 6:30 is fine. I'm fine with continuing tonight. Anything that you, as the board, want to do, I'm fine with.
So how about we do community comment? And then as a board, do you want to keep going, or do you want to plan for another follow-up, like a follow to finish up?
As much as I'd like to see these things resolved, I feel that we need to respect people's times who have, come as attendees.
Okay. So we'll,
Yeah.
how about we go ahead and we'll switch over public comment. We'll end for tonight, and then we will work on another meeting like Director Buller-Jack had suggested. So like one in the evening, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday.
I hate to see us delay it too awfully much because, as you said, it's rather a crisis mode. So.
Any suggestions on when?
I think some of this, and again, folks, I'm super curious to hear what folks have to say around this, but I think that some of what we're thinking about now is like, what is the plan to increase safety measures, right? I also definitely know we need to address how we're supporting people who are currently not at school. But I wonder if we could ask from Mr. Howard and Dr. Herndon to potentially draft us whatever the plan is to help ensure that that is getting addressed. Specifically around, we know that what has been in place is not working. And so how are we going to fix it? That's what I really need to know, like, soon. Beyond that, I'm okay.
And then in terms of safety next week, until there is something that's well established, not only for us, but for all the community members, I do believe as a board, we can call for school closures. Is that correct?
I mean, typically, the operational side falls under my side. And if, believe me, if we don't have tests available, I'll know Sunday or Monday, and then we can do that. But the rest of our protocols have been in place for a while. It's our staffing supplies that we want to make sure we have. So but I can commit that if we don't have the tests, I'm fine shifting to that because I want to make sure we have that. But I should find out as soon as I can find out. I should know either tomorrow or Sunday, and then as soon as I know, I can let the board know.
I perhaps wonder if I could offer, is there a way that we could like almost commit that by a particular time, whether we have the tests or we don't, we'll make a decision. So, because I want to make sure that we know that families and staff know what time they can expect a communication so that they can start planning a little bit about what could happen next week.
Yeah, I mean, I believe we have some communications going out that would prepare folks for the possibility if we have to shift to remote for elementary.
Yeah, I guess I mean, like, what is your cutoff time for, because you said either Sunday or Monday, but what is what can we agree is like the cutoff time for if we don't have tests by this time?
Well, obviously, as soon as possible on Monday at the latest. I would say by, I should know before then. So then it's about picking up. But I would say if we don't have tests available or I don't have a determination about that by noon on Monday, I'm fine making a call on that.
Noon on Monday.
I just think it would be beneficial for everyone if we could give the staff and community a little bit more heads up than that.
If I know sooner than that, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's the absolute latest. I mean, I might know, tomorrow, I might know later tonight. I've asked to be notified as soon as I know we have tests available. So that to me is the key. So I should
that's our only criteria at this point.
Well, that and seeing what our ability to fill for substitutes are. I can see if anyone has put in for absences on Tuesday. Again, sometimes, the absences are there, but we already know we're going remote for middle school and high school. So any substitutes we do have would be going to the elementaries, and we shouldn't run into the problem of staff having to cover for folks who aren't in.
I'm thinking about our families, like
Mhm.
even if we know, they don't know, right? And it takes time
So
to,
I'm just trying to get some clarification about what they would not know, what they don't know.
if we don't have tests,
Oh,
if we
yeah.
don't have what we need to keep people safe, and then
Right.
all of a sudden, even Monday to find out, like that is, that is, it's not, we're not being respectful. And not only that, we need to be able to translate everything and be able to get the word out. And so I,
But some of that is, in my opinion, some of this is also about, it's basically like I mean, it's way more simplistic than that, but it's kind of like a weather forecast. I mean, if we know something's happening, something happens late, we have to cancel school. Sometimes it is late. Unfortunately, we don't want it to be late, but I do know also that, it's very impactful to move to that remote instruction for elementary school students as well. So as soon as I know, I would feel comfortable making that call.
What I think we potentially could do though, because you even mentioned that there are communications that are being worked on right now.
Yes.
Can we prepare communications ahead of time
Yes.
for when those tests comes out? And I think it would be really valuable for folks that weren't able to attend tonight to know what our stockpile of tests are, exactly what you're thinking, like you laid out today, we have this many, we're expecting this shipment. Like, let them know some of the nuance of why we don't have these supplies or why this decision might be so made last minute. That way they can, again, start to plan ahead a little bit.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We'll work on that.
and then we'll work on another meeting. And so Debbie, will you help us start getting that ready?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and honor public comment. And
Can I just ask for
oh, sure.
something? So what we can expect would be protocols in place for
Yes. Yes, we have those protocols in place now. It's making sure we have the supplies enabled to be able to support the protocols.
Okay, and can we look at Auburn's to see, because according to what Megan was saying, that listed it out so definitively that it was extremely clear to everyone. What we have here is a little bit muddled.
Yes, we can look at a comparison.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm concerned that we are basing closing schools on just testing.
And our staff availability for sure, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And how our staff is available. Because that's the other piece of this, is like patching it together, having people leave other buildings. Really, we need our other team members in the district to help us with communication and do these other things that need to happen too, like like planning and getting things together. So it's like I see us in crisis mode, and this is not at all. It's not wise to stay this way. Folks are getting burned out. Well, anyways, let's just hear from folks. Let's shift gears and hear from folks. Please let us know how it's going.
Okay, so the first up for public comment is Katie Hugo. Go ahead, Katie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Katie Hugo. I am an elementary teacher at Tukwila Elementary. I just want to apologize in advance because for the past hour and a half, I've been writing down notes based on what's being said, and I have a lot of feelings right now. It's going to be like a verbal diarrhea dump of things. So I'm a little bit frustrated, annoyed, irritated about the lack of communication and the lack of preparation, the lack of consideration that has gone into any of this, especially around the elementary schools. I feel like we get shafted on everything all the time. In my building alone right now, we have 4 classrooms that are in quarantine. 2 of those classrooms because the teachers have now gotten it. Today, we had 35% of our children out. The facts that have been going off of for percentages were supposed to be coming from the office managers of the building, but today our office manager said she's not been asked one time for that data. In my classroom alone, I have multiple cases that have tested positive this week. There's been no contact tracing. My classroom is still open. Nothing's been cleaned. Our rooms are not getting cleaned at all, besides maybe a vacuum every once in a while. We've had no nurse in our building the past 2 days. So yesterday, our front office people couldn't do their job because they had to step in and be nurses, but don't have the qualifications because they're not nurses, and had to send home students that have health conditions because they couldn't treat them with what they needed to be treated with. So those kids are now missing school time because of the lack of preparation. In my classroom alone, since we've come back from break, I've had half of my class out. How am I supposed to effectively teach anybody when I don't have half of my kids there? I can't use my curriculum because then half of my kids fall further behind than they already are. The masks, especially for the little primary kids, they don't fit. They're never on their faces because they're sliding off. They're constantly exposing and being exposed to germs. Not to mention, they have breakfast in the classrooms, not just lunch in the cafeteria. Those classrooms that are never cleaned have kids with masks now 5 days still sick coming in. How are we helping them? How are we being effective for our families when we're not giving them facts, we're not protecting their kids, we're not protecting their teachers or staff members? What are you doing to help us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Jennifer Fachamba. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Jennifer Fichamba. I'm the College and Career Readiness Specialist at Foster High School. I'm actually also a building rep at Foster High School. And I just want to acknowledge that Foster High School is the reason why secondary is remote this week. I don't think that that's been acknowledged because we were without administration in our building. We were short-staffed in our building. We had tons of kids out with quarantine in our building. And so it is because of us that secondary is closed. It is unfortunate that the district didn't have the wherewithal to also consider that for elementary. I apologize to the elementary educators that are listening tonight that you also are not part of this. It's unacceptable. I have a lot to say. On the last thing that was up on the screen, I noted that it said vaccinations for K-12 educators are required to be vaccinated, or that vaccination, K-12 educators are required to be vaccinated as a condition of employment. We have unvaccinated staff in our district. That is unacceptable. There should not have been exemptions for staff when that was a mandate from the governor of this state. At Foster High School, we do not have a quarantine specialist. I agree, Megan has a great example of what we should be giving to families as an expectation to return to school. It needs to be in multiple languages. Communication, that doesn't need to have any explanation. There is none. Testing, test kits for athletics should be handled through athletics. So ordering specifically for them and ordering tests that are for day-to-day testing for our health room nurses at each building. Our nurses should also not be responsible for administering tests to athletes. Athletic trainer, coaches should be doing this. That would allow for them to do contact tracing. Lunchroom, we need to use ESSER money to provide outdoor seating by purchasing big, heavy-duty tents and picnic tables. This will allow at all of our buildings. This will allow students to spread out. I personally see out of the College and Career Center at Foster, kids in the rain in our courtyard eating lunch. We need to provide extra support in so many areas in this district, from elementary school needing extra social workers or counselors to support for our nurses, and then everything in between. And we have the money, the ESSER money, to do this. Masks. 2,000 KN95 masks are not enough for each person. Each person needs a minimum of 5 to start. And also, they need to come with instructions on how to keep them clean in multiple languages. Why is it now that we find out that there are even any available? We had no idea in Foster that these were available. It is unacceptable. I feel like one of the things that COVID has done, it has shone a light on all the cracks and crevices and shortcomings of this district. There's never been a point in my 9 years in Tukwila where we have not had to put the district in a pressure point to do what is right by us. And even when that pressure point is there, we still have to fight to get the respect, the care that our students and staff need. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have Jovita McConnell. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Jovita. I've been in this community for all my life. For 48 years, I've been a Tukwila Elementary student, Showalter, Foster High School graduate, live here, born and raised here. We have prided ourselves on diversity, but the past 2 hours listening, we sure aren't inclusive. What message are we giving these elementary kids, their families, if we're saying high school, middle school kids, they can do remote learning, but the babies, the elementary school, we're going to bring you guys in and staff in, and you guys are going to come to class. What are we telling these families? And I know it's hard. Nobody's exempt from the struggle we are all going through because we're all in it. The safety measures, nobody on this meeting, I feel like, can clearly articulate the COVID protocol. If you can't clearly articulate it and talk it, even with the data in hand, you probably shouldn't send these kids to school for at least 2 weeks minimum. Let's pull back the reins. And I know I sent a letter out to everybody on this board and all over social media. It's okay to pull back to speed up again. Let's be proactive. Let's get the communication plans dialed in. Let's do better for this community. I feel like it's just, it is so badly communicated and so badly ran right now. It just floors me. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jovita. Okay, I'm looking for Jenny Standard. Go ahead, Jenny. 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 Okay, we can come back to Jenny. Andrea?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Andrea Gamboa. I'm a teacher at Foster High School, and I want you to know, for those of you that don't know me, that this is my 17th year in the Tukwila School District. I wasn't planning to speak this evening, but after being here since 6 o'clock, I've taken some notes like some of my colleagues have mentioned, and I feel compelled to share a couple things. The first thing that I want to say is that one of the most important things needed for families to feel safe to send their students to us in Tukwila, for students themselves to feel safe to attend school in Tukwila, and for teachers who are risking so much to be there every day is trust. And what is really clear to me is that that has been broken, and that has been seriously lacking since this pandemic began. And just an example tonight about learning that we're not prioritizing contact tracing, this is the first I've heard of it. And so I've been sitting in a classroom with students for the past 2 weeks who have been telling me that they're not getting phone calls until 2 or 3 days after they've been exposed, and I'm not sure what to tell them. And I want to be able to give my students clear messaging. The other thing that I want to say is that students and staff have endured so much trauma through this pandemic. So many of us have lost so much, including precious family members, and things right now feel so out of control with our school district and the communication and the protocols and the safety. And this exacerbates that same trauma for all of us. I want to echo what my colleague Fichamba said about the KN95 and N95 masks. And I want to tell you that it can't be a suggestion, it needs to be a requirement. We cannot tell our students that we are providing safe spaces for them and then say, you can wear a cloth mask that we know is the least protective mask that you can possibly wear in a situation where they're not really social distancing because they can't. And I think if we have around 900 kids in our school, we have, I don't know, I'm throwing out numbers, y'all know them better than me, to, I don't know, maybe 100 staff, we're gonna need thousands and thousands and thousands of masks to get us through. And we cannot return to school and run out of supplies again. That is not okay, it's not acceptable, and it should never be acceptable. I also want to say, and I know you know this, but I think this needs to be said out loud, that our students, they live in multi-generational homes. This includes elders, it includes children who are under the age of 5 and not eligible to be vaccinated. If our families can access vaccines, if they can find resources in their own languages, the amount of stress that our students are carrying every day when they feel unsafe at school is not acceptable. I also want to say, and I just feel like this too needs to be acknowledged, that every single day teachers are risking the health and safety of so many people and their families. This includes partners, housemates, spouses, elder parents, their own children. This also causes a tremendous amount of stress, and it has been contributing to the mental health of teachers. Last week, I held circles with my social studies students. I asked permission to share this, so I want you to know that the students know that I might be sharing this with people who are in charge of this district. But they said, multiple kids said they felt the most unsafe they have ever felt attending Tukwila. Not Tukwila as a school, but in the district. And I have notes and notes from them. They said they feel overwhelming. There's too many subs, that they are frustrated. I wrote here in my notes that it hurts so much. They're stressed. They say that They want a different schedule. There's 6 hours, 6 classes. There's not enough sanitizing, that they're trying their best. And we're all carrying this every day on the front line in our classrooms. We love our students. We love our community. Jan, I heard you say that you want solutions. I think that we have really smart people in our district. I think that we are willing and able to put our heads together. And I just know and believe that we can. We have to do better. And we cannot go back in person until these safety measures are 100% in place and we are ready to go so we can keep our people safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, so next up is Sohaila. Go ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is so weird. I've never done one of these webinars. Okay, so I'm coming to you as a parent. I have a child in the elementary schools. So this definitely rings true for me that like, I feel frustrated that our school is being considered last. Like, I don't understand why our children are not being kept home also when the variant is very clearly so contagious. We got hit with COVID. We've been down. I think it's absurd. The CDC is 5 days. I kept my children home to keep other people safe. We're doing the full 14. I don't know. I just think it's very, very frustrating, like being here and my child. I went back to work this week virtually. I was very blessed to be able to work virtually. But there's really not been much for her to do. And I think that's no knock to her teachers. I think all of her teachers have been wonderful. But I just think that there's something in the structuring that's broken, that like my children have not been able to access distance learning very well. Even from when we did actual stay home, everybody stay home. I think there just wasn't enough support for the teachers to know how to navigate that. And now, like, you know, being what we had COVID and stayed home, like she's had nothing to do. So, I mean, just recently her teacher was able to post more stuff. And I think he sent a message saying, you know, can we get a Chromebook? And I still haven't heard back about that. And luckily we have one at home, but that's only by like a whim. Like we may not have had that from, you know, it was a circumstance that we got that. And I would definitely echo the communication factor. I mean, I think it's gotten a little bit better, but not enough. Like, I mean, I found out about this meeting through Facebook. And to me, like, I love social media, but I feel like there should be more of a messaging to families in more than one way, because it was only the PTA group that I'm a part of as a parent that I saw about this. And that's been the case. Like I've had to tell my friends that go to our same school about things that are happening and they didn't hear about it otherwise. So I just think that's not really acceptable. So both those things. And I don't understand. I'm still really confused why we would not be closing the elementary if we obviously clearly need to get more things in place to support teachers and families to keep everyone safe. And it's very concerning as a parent that classrooms are not being cleaned. Like that to me is very, very concerning. And I wonder about the spread. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Jenny Standard. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hi, thank you for that. I apologize about not being able to talk before. I'm Jenny Standard. I'm the college and career counselor at Foster High School, and I'm going to share a portion of a letter that I sent to the board this week. We came back to the building this fall and proceeded as though everything was back to normal. And I know you've already heard this a lot tonight, but I'm here to tell you that things are nowhere near normal. I've seen students struggling like never before. I've had conversations with several students who have lost a parent or close family member to COVID. I have seen pain in their eyes and so many questions about how we can be back to normal when nothing for them will ever again be normal. I also know students are struggling in classes, and I'm not sure how much learning can happen when they are expending so much energy worrying and feeling stressed out with no real social emotional curriculum, even after asking for this since the spring of 2020. With the exception of the 20-minute advisory lessons the advisory team creates and tries to offer at least 2 times a month. I'm getting emails daily from students who are staying home because they are scared to come or their parents are scared to let them come in, and they are asking for remote options until things are safer. I don't know what to tell them as there doesn't seem to be any kind of a plan in the works that I have seen. Students have also reported today that we are out of tests and that that was Wednesday, and that symptomatic students are unable to be tested because the 17 tests that were left had to be saved to test our student athletes. My teacher colleagues are a mess. I know many shed tears on Tuesday night when they heard you, the board, bring up the concerns about our teachers' mental health. No one has said anything to them about this until then. Thank you for doing so that night. Even teachers who are so strong are falling apart at the seams. They are asked daily to give up their planning period to cover other staff absences. They are mentally and emotionally exhausted. I worry most for our early career teachers who started their teaching careers this year with so little support. It's heartbreaking. As a first-time building rep this year, I'm receiving texts, calls, and emails daily and at all times during the day and night from my colleagues. I just spent much of my lunch break on Wednesday speaking with a first-year teacher who is so overwhelmed. We, my colleagues and I, came to the board meeting on Tuesday night for answers from our district leadership, and we came away with almost no answers, but a lot of I will have to get back to you on that. How are we supposed to get those answers when we won't be privy to the information shared later with you? And now I know that we're getting some of that tonight, so I really appreciate that. Much of what I heard last night is not happening at Foster. We need better masks for our students. What they are wearing is often poor quality and ill-fitting. We do not have a quarantine coordinator at Foster and haven't had one all year. We were down to one administrator and our office manager reported 9 teachers out sick on Wednesday. By my math, if we have 45 teachers, that's 20% of our teaching staff out with not enough subs. I heard that 2 classes were combined and our HR director was the supervisor. At what point do we say this is unsafe? Is this really better than teaching and learning, the teaching and learning that could be provided even for a short time remotely until Omicron calms down? I could say so much more, but I will stop at this. I am exhausted and overwhelmed, and I am in better shape than most. I appreciated your questions last night and your recognition of educators struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, I am looking for Marion. I hope I pronounced that right. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Perry Ann Brewer. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Thorndike. I would like to comment on the fact that elementary cannot shift just like the secondary can. Secondary was able to shift so quickly because all of their students have Chromebooks already. We don't have that for our kids. They have Chromebooks in the classroom, but they are not issued. So we would have to, in order for us to shift, we would have to take longer and asynchronous for our kids to be able to participate in class. And speaking, so the last parent that spoke said that she just happened to have a Chromebook and she was lucky. Tuesday night, I heard that there was a surplus sale this past summer, and I think our families should get first option. How many of our families would have bought that in preparation for this school year? But they would have had to search the Seattle Times to find that information. That's not okay. Our families should have first dibs on any type of surplus sale where it's technology is concerned. I have a couple more notes here. Erin has been amazing at stepping in, and other people have for our admin when they've been out absent. But why aren't you all stepping into the classrooms? And last, we are a district of 5 schools. How is it that larger districts are able to have better plans and communication than us? We should be at the front of the pack when it comes to this, being that we are only 5 schools, but we're consistently coming in last, or at least what feels like last. Speaking of people stepping into the classroom, My suggestion to the board, and I've told other teachers this, future admin contracts and director contracts should state that they have to spend at least 1 day a month doing someone else's job in the district, whether it's the custodians, the kitchen staff, teachers, everyone. They need to know what it feels like to be in our shoes, especially the elementary, because most people at admin come from secondary. You need to come spend time in our buildings. It's not okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person will be, if I can find them, Sonia.
I think she spoke.
Sonia already spoke. Okay.
Or that may have been Sahalia.
Right, I'm looking for Sonia and I don't see a hand raised and I'm unable to find her in particular. Just want to make sure I'm not missing. Oh, there she is.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sonia. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Sonia Bajoric and I teach at Cascade View Elementary. I'll have to say I'm a little bit scared to say anything. And I think some people know why. First of all, my class was the first class to go out at the beginning of the school year. And I found out that we were going into quarantine when Jeff Baker walked into my classroom to pass out Chromebooks. I had no idea that I had a child the day before in the classroom with COVID, had no idea my class was going out on quarantine until Jeff walked in with Chromebooks and said, I'm going to get these in your kids' hands. And I thought, yay, kindergarten is finally getting a full set of devices for our classes. And then he started talking about checking them out. And I'm like, what is going on? And then after that is when somebody came to my door with a letter to send home to my kids. And I did not, in the whole time we were on quarantine, I was not told what child had COVID. That was not communicated with me at all. I stayed until 6 o'clock that night, waiting to find out what the plan was, what I was supposed to do, what my children were supposed to do, and had no communication whatsoever. I drove in the next morning to school, knowing that my room was going to be sprayed. I drove in anyway, and no one had any idea what I should do, what my kids should do. And I was sent back home. I set things up to go online the very next day with my families. I called them or I emailed them or I text them. Many of the families had no idea how to even turn the Chromebook on because there were no instructions at all with the Chromebooks. And that's how the year started out, and it has not gotten any better. There's no communication, there's no plan, and it's not like COVID started yesterday. We were out all year last year. Why didn't we have a plan in place when we came back in September? That really concerns me that we didn't know what we were doing. No one knew what they were doing. And also, as more than one person has mentioned, we had no idea at all that there were any KN95 masks for teachers to have. We've been providing our own masks. Not that we haven't been told we can have paper ones, but we didn't know that the district had a supply of any masks for us to have. And I will say, I have mixed feelings on quarantining. I mean, as far as going out, full school going out, just because for elementary children, it is extremely difficult for them to pay attention when they're at home. You've got very big families living in small apartments with a lot of distractions and a lot of noises, and kids are not learning. They're upside down in their chair. They're sliding out of their chair. It's really, really difficult for them. So I'm very torn between the safety aspect and the academics, because I can see how last year's children suffered from not being able to be in person. So I hope that the correct decision is made. And I can tell you, I really don't even know what decision that is. And I agree also with Perian when she spoke to elementary not being able to go out as quickly as the high school and middle school can go out. We have families that struggle on a daily basis, and to ask them, one of them, to give up their job that they cannot do remotely, they're giving up income that they can't afford to give up. And that's another one of my concerns. And they don't have people to watch their kids. I know that I had children last year that were sitting at home by themselves while their parents worked. That's not safe either. And our students don't have Chromebooks. And like I said, kindergartners had not had any experience with Chromebooks at all, and they were sent home without any instructions. And a lot of kids don't know how to use them. So I think we have done a really extremely poor job communicating with our teachers, communicating with our families, in all aspects surrounding COVID. I think we failed horribly. The teachers don't know what to tell the families, and we're told nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I have Jennifer Castillo. Go ahead.
Hello, hi again. My name is Jennifer Castillo. I have children at Showalter and at Tukwila Elementary. And if I didn't highlight this before, our teachers, our paras, our families, our building staff, we're tired. We trust the teachers with the well-being and lives of our students every single day. And I do not say this lightly. The teachers that we've had the absolute pleasure of working with at both Tukwila Elementary School and at Showalter have my deepest respect and trust. If it isn't working in an underfunded, understaffed environment, it's working every single day where they choose to put their own well-being at risk. Their school shootings and worldwide pandemic are now the norm. Mental health for staff and students is paramount, and support is paramount. Yet here you are hanging them out to dry. I'm speaking directly to you, Flip. Please call it now. Close elementary schools and compose a clear and concise plan. Because after listening to you for the past couple of hours, it is apparent that you don't have one. If you call it now, families will have the weekend to come up with a plan, and they will not have to be struggling to make it happen at the 11th hour on a Monday night like you did to the rest of us last night. Call it now and use all of next week to help prepare the teachers and help shift families to prepare for remote learning. If you call it now so that you can formulate and articulate a clear plan to your staff, to your students, families, and community members moving forward. Please close elementary schools so we can get out of crisis mode. We love our teachers and we are here to support them. Please listen to what they're saying to you because their concerns are apparent and overwhelming. Do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Courtney Martinez.
Hello again. So I want to again echo what a lot of people have said about, and I'm not tooting my own horn in any regard because I'm an educator, but the staff that have been amazing with my children over the years and the staff that I see engaging and just loving on and trying to inspire and educate all of the children in our buildings is really amazing. And hearing what everybody's talking about this evening and taking my own notes as well, I start to question, when are discussions going to be happening at like the state level with OSPI to discuss that there is a lot of instances where remote learning doesn't work for particular learners. I work in a building that houses our amazing LRC2 program, which is our self-contained special education program. And I don't know how I would physically teach them PE skills in a remote setting. This would be my first year having to do that with them. And there are a variety of different types of learners, K-12, that struggle with a remote option. So again, thinking about that proactiveness, right? That we need to start thinking of different options then, because this remote option doesn't seem like it's going to be this one-time occurrence. Also, echoing back to a lot of sentiment on the overnight flip, the flip from being in person to being remote at the elementary level. I really applaud the forethought and again, the proactiveness at the secondary level that they issued out Chromebooks at the start of the year. So again, my children at middle and high school have been shuttling their Chromebooks to and fro. But at the elementary level, what has been said is like, that's not the case. Our youngest scholars in the kindergarten level, they have never used a Chromebook. They are strictly on iPads. So again, I question being proactive. Like if the thought is that we are going to switch to remote, then what about our youngest scholars? It doesn't seem like we're adding that forethought in. And then another thought is that I understand the sense of urgency in needing to make a decision in order to communicate that out as fast and effectively as possible. But I also I'm torn with the phrases of like close, because a closure would have to be remade up. Many of our families, especially at Thorndike, ticket prices to fly to see family in Kenya, to see grandparents in Iran, ticket prices are cheaper in June. And so now we're thinking of closing, and then that's going to extend our school year. And what's going to happen to those families then? Those priceless moments that they get to spend with loved ones, like they get to now spend more time in school because we didn't have a plan already. So again, we need to be very methodical in what we're doing, and we need to stop the reactions out of crisis mode. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Laura Lindy.
Hi, I'm Laura Lindy, counselor at Foster High School. And Jan, I appreciate that you asked for possible solutions. And I think that's an important part of the process, and how do we involve everyone to find some of those solutions. I have just a few ideas that I can come up with right now as people were talking. One thing, and it may seem basic, but is to really provide the resources to follow the MOU for things like testing and masks and contact tracing. I had a student tell me that they were at the same lunch table with someone who turned COVID positive later that day, but that the student wasn't informed, and that student felt really angry and nervous to be at school. And staff not knowing that they can have access to masks where they're spending their own money for those things. So those are some things that can help just through communication, being real clear and regular, and and timely, and that transparency, that will help lessen people's anxiety. I'm seeing high levels of anxiety and high levels of pressure and depression, but mostly the anxiety. With the high number of absences due to COVID and quarantining and students being afraid to be at the school, and students now not having access to technology, possibly as far as Wi-Fi, I think one decision that could be made is to freeze grades, where grades can only go up from like where before break, before this all started getting quite so bad. And that students can be able to raise their grades, but have them not go down. That would help reduce students' anxiety because they've been missing so much instruction. I have so many students emailing me being concerned about missing their classes and being out and being sick and not being able to do the world language exam because they need that still to meet their graduation requirements, but they are home with COVID. It's just, our students are being just hit really hard right now, and their families. There was a board meeting earlier, I can't remember if it was in December or earlier this month, probably December, where you're considering the policy about credit for previously failed course. And what I would ask you to do is, in every time that you're considering your policies right now, is considering the context that we're in and the student's circumstances. The policy is that you're considering, or a procedure was changing it from a B meeting the requirement to a C, which our math department had recommended along with some other people. Yesterday, I was meeting with a senior who's trying to graduate, who had kind of given up earlier in the year and encouraged a student, and they're trying again. But they just missed over a week of school due to being COVID positive and being ill. And their dad is in the hospital with COVID, and the student is working to help support the family. And if the policy for credit retrieval is changed to a grade of C or higher instead of B, then that student will earn credit for a class that they still need to graduate. And that would save them from doing an online class on top of everything else. So these decisions, these policies you're making, just try to think of it, especially in the context that we're in right now. There's a high level of pressure at the high school with the staff and the students, and find ways to try to reduce that pressure, like asking staff and students what would feel supportive to them, to their mental health. Is it to change the schedule? Is it how to acknowledge and address what's happening? And then my last thing is this. So this is my 27th year overall as a school counselor and my 14th year at Foster. And the mental health needs really changed quite dramatically for our students about starting 7 or 8 years ago. And it's gotten exponentially worse since the pandemic began. And high school counseling has also changed dramatically with the changes in graduation requirements, graduation pathways, personalized pathways. And we really need a fourth school counselor at the high school. It's helpful to have a social worker, very helpful to have a mental health counselor, but we most often access the students through their academic needs. They won't necessarily come in and ask for help in other ways, but through those academic needs, then we can find out the other things that are going on and provide them that support. And so I really, and we've already trained all of our staff on suicide prevention this year, but we really need a regular social emotional curriculum at the high school to meet the changing needs, like I said, even before COVID, to increase the distress tolerance and emotional regulation and some of those things, as I talked earlier about my concerns about suicide risk in students just making suicide attempts with the kind of spur of the moment decisions. And so really solid social emotional curriculum would help with that as well. So those are just some ideas that I have to help change what's going on in a more positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Erin?
I also was not planning to talk, but have been taking notes. One thing I want to say is just because the Department of Health has changed something or has set a standard doesn't mean we as a district have to do that bare minimum. We can do more than that. We should do more than that. When we talk about we don't need to be contact tracing at lunches, lunches are the one time of the day that students are taking their masks off, facing each other, laughing, talking for an extended period of time. I mean, it used to be 15 minutes was what the amount of time was before. With Omicron, we know it's way, way more contagious. It just doesn't logically make sense that we wouldn't need to contact trace at lunch. So even if it's not required, we don't need to do the minimum. With the 5-day quarantine, which we know that everybody reacts differently, everybody's immune system reacts differently to the virus. We know that some people will be coming back that are still contagious after 5 days. They should be tested before they go back to their classes. This should be a requirement. Even if that's not recommended by the Department of Health, we don't have to do the minimum. We need to do what's right for our kids and our staff. I know it's been said already. I'm sorry, I'm a teacher at Foster. We have not had a quarantine specialist. I know that has already been said. And when I hear that we're working on a plan for students that are in quarantine, it's January and we've had kids in quarantine since September, or they've been quarantining since the beginning of school. We should have had a plan so much long ago. Again, I want to talk about communication. I personally, my daughter goes to school in Highline and we get communication every week, both from the district and her school. And I've actually forwarded some of their communication to our COVID email address as examples of ways that they are communicating out, and I asked for communication to go out to our families before winter break, telling them ways that they could be safer, and provided examples that I got, and nothing went out the whole time. Highline sent things out during break. I know Seattle sent things out during break. We got nothing. But I do recognize that the day that the Department of Health changed their recommendation to 5 days, that communication went out within hours. We can't communicate how to be safer in our schools, but we can communicate immediately when it's less safe. The other thing that I also want to emphasize, I know that it feels scary to go back to remote learning because the last time this happened, we went out for much longer than we expected. This is not the same situation. This is for a short period of time so we can get things figured out, put systems in place that should have already been in place so that we can be safe at school. This is not a long-term thing, it's a short-term thing to be proactive rather than how we are always being reactive. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Jessica Paulson.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Paulson. I'm a teacher at Showalter Middle School. I've been there for 13 years. And I just wanted to piggyback off of some of the communication. I looked around at some other websites of other school districts, and I was looking around at our website tonight as everyone was talking, and our COVID-19 link or button, if you look on your phone, which most of our families have access through our phone, looks like every other button that's on there. And it is at the bottom of the page. You have to scroll down. It should be the first thing, banner at the top, or like how the school board meeting link pops up when you open up the website. It should be the first thing that pops up. Are you wanting COVID-19 information? Here it is. It could be definitely much more visible and forefront. Secondly, about communication, I have to say, I totally agree with calling whatever you're going to call for elementary right away, because I'm just assuming, but I'm gonna say, I'm sure that the decision was made before 2:30 on Thursday that we were going to go remote for the week. And if we would have had that information, even just at 2:20, I could have set up a lot of my sixth graders that I had in my sixth period who had only done remote learning through elementary school in the spring, and it could look very, very different from when they have multiple teachers to check in with and multiple classes to go to. If we would have had that information just even 5 minutes, I could have done a lot for my kids. Myself and Nancy Kawai and a couple of other staff members sat by our door and entrance this morning. There was no one there. There was no administration. There was no one from the district office for the students that showed up, because they couldn't get that information within that time frame. And a lot of them that showed up needed translation. So Nancy Kwai sat and translated with her newcomer students. She had documents ready. She was prepared because she knew her newcomers would not have that information. So I think the assumption that families can get this information is incorrect. And we had to be there for students who showed up. Then throughout the day, I stayed in the building. There were other staff members there. One of our paraeducators, who was not required to be there at all, showed up and sat at our front door for hours to meet families that came later in the day to get them help in finding their Chromebooks and their chargers, because not all students had been taking them home every day. They had been leaving them in their homerooms. What floors me is that I was on the preparation for the fall. I was on the team in the spring. We had started this work in the spring. What would fall look like if and when we could go back to school, and then if we had to go remote again? And those conversations started in the spring, and nothing has been put out in writing. Nothing has been available since then. The teams that were meeting dissolved, and then it became one team that just made a schedule for the spring, and then didn't really continue. It just, the preparation, other colleagues and parents have said, is ridiculous. We knew that this could potentially happen, and nothing was prepared for this moment. When you send me an email at 2:45, 3 o'clock, that tomorrow we're not having school, and then the next week we're going remote. There could have been a well laid out document with different scenarios, like if a class goes out of quarantine, this is what it looks like. If a school goes out of quarantine, goes out onto remote learning, this is what it looks like. If the secondary goes, it could have been all laid out and very well explained. We could have been preparing our students. I will be surprised if we have good attendance next week on Zoom at the secondary level, because kids just weren't prepared and they weren't ready for this. So the frustration is high and it's getting late, so I will stop there, but I just wanted to make sure that that was known. Also, the quarantine specialist at our school is working tirelessly to contact trace. She does not have time to check in with the students that are gone, especially since it's 30% of our population and it's one person, about online learning. I have 2 students in my homeroom who had to go out on quarantine. This was a couple weeks ago, the week before break, and then the week after. And the onus was on the family to sign up for tutoring, not on the district to get them set up. And I think that that's not the way to do that if that's what our option was. And also, as a teacher, I had no idea that that existed. And then when we said we didn't know, then the communication came out that that was an option. So we have all these things that you say are in place, but no one knows about it. So please just work on preparation and try to think ahead and support everyone you possibly can in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Margaret?
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Hi, Margaret. We can hear
Hi.
you.
Hi, good. So this is Margaret and I work in CV, and my thing is lack of communication in regards on or COVID new rules, because I had a COVID and it took me 3 days to figure out when can I come back to school. And I know everybody is busy, but this should be done faster so I can actually know the same day, hey, this is it. So I don't know if it's not enough people who can pick up the phone and answer those questions. And as a staff, I think we are not informed what are the new procedures, because we can be at least making those decisions faster. And for example, we had paraeducator whose son tested positive. She was told she can stay in school. We have paraeducator, also support staff is not informed about who had a COVID, and she was working 30 minutes every day with kids who were positive for COVID, siblings. And you know, she works with another kids right after these siblings. And she was confused. She was walking around and trying to ask somebody if she's supposed to go or not, but nobody informed her. Sorry, my dog. So I just feel like we are just not informed about these new rules. We are all confused. And I think when we're doing tracing, we need to make sure that we know who else is working, not only teachers in the classroom, but any support staff. If this is special ed or reading specialists, math specialists, ELL, seems like we never know. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I, at this time, don't see any other hands raised or mentioned in chat for public comment.
And this is our first time tonight that we tried at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting, I think we've been doing public comment for about an hour, 20 minutes. Does that sound about right? And I feel so much more informed from our community this evening because we had a chance to hear and get a better view of what's happening from all different aspects of our schools. And so I just want to thank everybody, and to follow up sort of next steps. So how about Director Hoover, would you be willing to summarize what's going to happen next? Because we kind of were hustling to pull together next steps.
Yeah, so there were a few next steps, and I just want to confirm that what I had asked, that the rest of the board agrees that we want over the next few days, a laid out plan of how we are actually going to support the young people that are in remote learning, whether it's just an individual, a few people in a classroom, or the whole classroom or the whole school. Again, reiterating that we know the things that are in place, but as we've heard several times this evening and in other communications, it is not working. So what is our plan to address what is not working? And then the other piece is that we are going to reconvene early next week to continue working on our policies. I would also like to ask the board if we can agree that we would like for potentially for Dr. Herndon to come to that meeting with drafts of what those outlined policies could be, so that we are not so that then we can just add to rather than drafting it as we go. In the meantime, Dr. Herndon is going to be working on communication for what could potentially happen in our elementary age classrooms next week, unless or if the decision is made sooner based on things that we have heard tonight or other information coming through. I think that is the summary. Okay.
Thank you. And
I was
any
gonna,
final?
if I may offer something, I really do appreciate all of the feedback and the public comment as well, and the sense of wanting to know. I think it helps everybody with that. So what I can commit to is making that call tomorrow by 5 o'clock and not waiting until Sunday or Monday. So if I don't know anything by then, I'm let me have the opportunity to meet with my staff, draft a possible communication, and then I can inform the board, let you know tomorrow by 5 o'clock about what's happening next week with elementaries.
How's that with the board?
That sounds good. And I just want to reiterate too, for folks that are listening, there are still all the things that we had hoped to get addressed tonight will be on the docket when we meet early next week. So again, communication plans. I intend to start making a list of all the things that have been shared tonight around that. And I know other folks will as well. So I just wanted to commit and reiterate that that is like at the top of our agenda when we meet early next week.
Yes.
And also, I just want to also open it up to the board if there's any final thoughts, any final summaries for this evening. I do know that we had one more public comment that almost got forgot, and I want to practice being inclusive. And it happens to be our district nurse. So we'll go ahead and have that be part of our conclusion this evening.
Hannah, can you unmute, please?
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have to agree with Dr. Herndon. It was wonderful hearing everybody's comments. I don't know if any of the nursing staff or any of our quarantine specialists are available as attendees right now, but I just wanted to acknowledge their work. I know that they're also working tirelessly to kind of keep all the students safe and keep everyone healthy. And I just wanted to thank them and recognize that work that they've done so far. And yeah, I look forward to working on improving all of our systems. And thank you so much.
Director Bolajak, Director Larson, Director Morris, any final thoughts?
I appreciate everyone's feedback and thoughts tonight, your compassion for the work that you do. I'm always amazed by that and inspired. And I do think we can improve things. We have the expertise. We just got to put it in place and get it out there. I am concerned about our elementaries. I don't know what the answer is there. But I'm really holding you with deep care because what's going on there is really important, and I don't want you to feel overlooked or left behind. So anyway, that's all I'll say for now.
Yeah, and I've got I think 9 pages of notes here, lots of good information. And both in kind of short-term, medium-term, long-term kinds of things that we need to work on. And I'm sure all for the benefit of our students. So look forward to continuing the work. Thanks.
I'd like to express appreciation to those who shared their thoughts and feelings and insights, and to our staff who works tirelessly. You're greatly appreciated, and keep up the good work.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourn the meeting, but not the work.
Stay safe,
Thank you all.
and we'll be in communication soon. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.